The birthday cake was a masterpiece of gold leaf and vanilla cream, but it looked like a tombstone once the envelope landed next to it. They chose her 43rd birthday, a day meant for Imara Adeyemi's light, to try and bury her in shadows. As the white paper slid across the linen, the music didn't stop, but the air in the Adeyemi garden turned brittle. Neighbors frozen in their silk dresses, children silenced by the sudden shift in the wind. Everyone watched the envelope. They saw a woman about to break. They saw the end of a legacy. What they didn't see was the fire igniting behind Imara's dark, steady eyes. Standing in her cream silk dress, Imara didn't flinch. She had spent decades surviving storms in silence, and this was just another gust of wind. To the crowd, she was falling. To herself, she was finally shedding a skin that no longer fit. The banner above whispered her name in the breeze, a celebration of the woman she used to be. But as Imara's fingers brushed the seal of that envelope, she wasn't just turning a year older, she was finally waking up. Hello friends, welcome to Black Bite Stories. Before we begin today's story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love hearing from our global family. She was not passive, she was patient. There is a difference, and that difference was about to change everything. Her 3 daughters, Zola, Imara, and little Ife, ran through the garden in matching gold dresses, laughing the way 10-year-olds laugh when the world still feels made for them. Imara watched them, and her whole face softened. Whatever she had been carrying for months, it lifted whenever she looked at those girls. Her husband Darius arrived late, not a few minutes late, the kind of late that made a statement. He walked through the garden gate, with his phone already in his hand, barely looking up. He did not walk to Imara first. He walked to his mother. Constance Adeyemi was a tall woman in her late 60s, dressed in structured charcoal, with the posture of someone who had decided long ago that warmth was a luxury she could not afford. She and Darius embraced, and he bent close to say something low, and she nodded once with the satisfied expression of a general being told the plan was in motion. Then Darius drifted to a corner near the fence with his friend Marcus. They laughed about something private, shoulders loose, glasses raised. Imara watched. She always watched everything. She simply never made a scene about what she saw. She picked up her glass of water, took a slow sip, and smiled at the neighbor who had just walked over to wish her a happy birthday. She was carrying everything and showing nothing. That was the skill nobody in that garden understood yet. Then the other woman arrived. Her name was Vanessa. She was in her early 30s, overdressed in a way that communicated intention. She walked through the garden gate without an invitation, like she had every right to be there. Darius waved her over, introduced her to 2 guests nearby as a colleague. Some guests smiled politely. Others looked at each other with questions in their eyes. Imara watched from across the garden, then quietly went to fix the loose bow on Ife's dress and pressed a kiss to the top of her daughter's head. She said nothing. She did not need to yet. Constance stood up without waiting to be given the floor. She tapped her glass with a spoon, and the garden went quiet, 1 table at a time. People turned to look. Constance straightened her spine and began to speak, with the deliberate pace of a woman who had rehearsed this moment many times in private. She did not call it a toast. She called it the truth. She said she had watched her son give 20 years to a woman who had never matched him. She said she had stayed quiet out of respect for the marriage. She said that respect had run out. She said Imara had always been beneath what Darius deserved, that a real partner would have recognized that and stepped aside. The garden was completely still. The music had stopped. Someone had turned it off, or it had simply felt that way. Guests stared at their laps, at the sky, at the flowers, anywhere except at Imara. Darius stood near the fence with his hands in his pockets and said nothing. He looked at the ground. Vanessa stood near the dessert table with the smallest, most careful smile on her face. Then Constance reached into her handbag. She pulled out a sealed envelope. She walked it across the garden slowly, shoulders back, like she was crossing a stage she had been building toward for 2 decades. She placed it on the birthday table next to the uncut cake. She looked directly at Imara and said, "Consider this a gift." Zola reached for her mother's hand first. Imara stepped in close on the other side. Little Eve, the youngest by 4 minutes, began to cry without making a sound. The tears just rolled down her face like they did not know how to stop. Imara looked down at her daughters. She put one hand on Zola's shoulder and wiped Eve's tears with her thumb. Then she looked at the envelope. Then she looked at Constance. Then she looked at Darius, who still had nothing to say to her, not one word, not one syllable. Imara nodded once, slowly, not in defeat, not in surrender. The kind of nod that means I already knew this was coming, the kind that means you just made the worst mistake of your life, and you do not understand that yet. What Constance did not know, what Darius did not know, what not one person standing in that garden could have possibly imagined. Every inch of the ground beneath their feet belonged to Imara. Every flower, every light, every table, the house behind them, the land it sat on, the future they thought they were dividing, all of it. And the story of how it got there started long before any of them had ever said her name. To understand Imara, you have to go back to a red clay road in rural Mississippi, where the air smelled like pine and iron and something baking before sunrise. She was born in a house where nothing came easy and everything was earned with both hands. Her parents worked land that had been in the family for 3 generations, and they raised Imara with the understanding that dignity was not given to black women in America. It was built quietly, brick by brick, in the dark, before anyone was watching. She lost her mother at age 8 to a hospital that took too long to treat a black woman who was bleeding internally in a waiting room. Her father buried his wife and kept going because there was no other choice. He worked harder and said less and raised Imara to be grounded the way old trees are grounded, deep roots, quiet crown, unmoved by wind. He died when she was 22, just before she finished her business degree, leaving her a modest inheritance and 12 acres of land in Mississippi that nobody thought were worth anything, nobody except Imara. She did not grieve loudly. She grieved the way she did everything, internally, completely, and then she got to work. She took that land to a real estate attorney named Mr. Ellington, a steady black man in his 50s who wore the same reading glasses for 12 years and answered his phone on the second ring without fail. He told her what she already suspected, that land sat above a mineral deposit that had been overlooked for 40 years. The documentation to claim those mineral rights was complicated, buried in layers of legal history designed to discourage people like her from pursuing it. She pursued it anyway. It took 11 years. It cost her sleep and relationships and a version of herself that had once believed things came quickly. But she built it. She built all of it under the name Nana Holdings LLC, named for her late grandmother. A woman who once told a 7-year-old Imara that the earth does not announce its value. It simply holds. By the time she met Darius, she had already quietly accumulated more than most people would see in 3 lifetimes. She chose not to tell him the full scope of it, not out of deception, out of wisdom. She needed to see who he was when he thought she had nothing extraordinary. She watched him for years. She watched how he spoke to waitstaff and how he handled disappointment and how he behaved when no one was watching him. She loved him genuinely in the beginning, but she also watched. And over time, what she saw told her everything she needed to know. After the birthday party, the collapse came quietly, not with loud fights, but with silence and distance. Darius stopped coming home on time, and when he did, his mind seemed far away, as if the family sitting with him at the table didn't truly exist. Constance moved quickly. She had been preparing for this moment for years. Slowly, she began shaping the story in Darius's mind. She told him Imara had married him for stability, that she had hidden her background on purpose, and that a man of his status deserved someone more refined, someone like Vanessa. Soon, Constance hired a family attorney and placed divorce papers in front of Darius. Without reading them carefully, he signed. He trusted his mother more than he trusted his own instincts. Vanessa played her part perfectly. Over the past year, she had woven herself into Darius's daily life. She brought Zola a science book, praised Imara's drawings, and even used Ife's private nickname. Imara noticed everything but stayed silent. The weeks that followed were heavy. Not because Imara was broken, but because she had to stay strong while watching her family slowly fall apart. Zola barely touched her dinner. Imara started sleeping with the light on. One night, Ife softly asked, "Mom, is Dad going to leave us?" Imara held her daughter's braid and looked at her reflection. "No matter what happens," she said gently, "you will always have all of me." One night after the girls were asleep, Imara walked out to the garden alone. She sat at the same table where the birthday cake had never been cut. The string lights were gone. The banner was down. Just the garden, the dark, the silence. She let herself feel everything she had been containing for months. The grief of a marriage that had hollowed itself out from the inside. The rage she had refused to perform in public. The love for her daughters that had never once flickered. She let the tears come. They came quietly, the way hers always did. Then she wiped her face. She straightened her back. She took out her phone and called one number. Mr. Ellington answered on the second ring. She said, "It's time, Ellington." He did not ask if she was certain. He had been her attorney for 17 years. He said, "Everything is ready, Imara. Everything has been ready." She ended the call and sat in the dark garden a few minutes longer, not in grief, in preparation. The way a woman sits when she's about to unlock a door that has been closed for a very long time. The annual Legacy Gala was the most attended social event in the city's black community calendar. It was held at a renovated cultural arts centre, the kind of venue that took years and real money to restore. White tents stretched across the courtyard, round tables held flickering candle arrangements. A string quartet played near the garden entrance. Women came in evening gowns, men came in tailored suits. Everyone who mattered was there. This was the gathering where the city's most prominent black families came to be seen, to give, and to belong to something larger than themselves. Darius was there. Constance was on his left. Vanessa was on his arm. They moved through the tent like a rehearsed unit. Constance had worn something deep red and was in her social element, surrounded by people whose respect she had spent decades managing. She had spent the past several weeks performing the role of a mother who had rescued her son from an unsuitable marriage, and people believed what they were shown. That was the dangerous thing about Constance. She understood the power of presentation. She had used it her whole life. She had just never met someone who understood it more. Imara arrived late. She came in through the main entrance alone, in a deep burgundy gown that did not demand attention, but received it anyway. She walked slowly, not with hesitation, with certainty. The quiet that followed her across the tent was not uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of recognition, the sense that something significant had just entered the room. She greeted a few people warmly, accepted a glass of water from a server, and found a seat near the center of the tent with the ease of a woman who already knew how the evening was going to end. Darius saw her from across the tent, and something moved across his face. Not quite guilt, something more complicated. The beginning of a man realizing he has miscalculated in a way he cannot yet measure. The host of the evening was Dr. Adaeze Okafor. a physician and philanthropist who had spent 30 years building institutions in this city. She was precise, and she was serious, and she did not waste language. She approached the microphone, and the quartet softened to silence. She thanked the guests for coming. She spoke briefly about the Arts Center and what it represented for a community that had been historically denied access to cultural investment. Then she said there was one announcement she had been waiting all evening to make. She said the gala, the full renovation of the building behind them, and the scholarship fund being launched tonight had been made possible by a single private philanthropic gift. She said the holding company responsible had been operating quietly in this community for nearly 20 years, building, investing, waiting for the right moment to give back at scale. She paused. Then she said the name, Nana Holdings, LLC. The tent went still in the way that only happens when a name lands and people feel its weight before they fully understand it. Dr. Okafor said she would like to invite the founder to come forward. Imara set her water glass down on the table. She stood up, smoothed the front of her gown, and walked to the microphone with the same unhurried, grounded pace she had carried her whole life. She did not look at Darius or Constance. Instead, she faced the crowd and spoke calmly. In just 4 minutes, she said what 20 years of explanation never could. She spoke her father's name and then her grandmother's, letting each one settle in the air. The women who raised her, she said, had taught her that sometimes the loudest thing a black woman can do is simply outlast what tries to break her. Since childhood, she had been told, both directly and indirectly, that women who looked like her were not meant to own things of such magnitude, that the systems around them were designed to make sure they never did. Still, she built quietly, patiently, moving through every small opening she could find and even unlocking doors that others believed were permanently closed. She thanked Mr. Ellington, who sat near the back with his usual calm smile, then turned her eyes toward her daughters, Zola, Imara, and Ife, standing together in matching burgundy dresses and watching their mother with shining pride. Behind her, the large screen lit up, revealing Nana Holdings LLC with total assets valued at $17.3 billion, including properties across 7 states, mineral rights, real estate investments, and a growing foundation. Near the bottom appeared a familiar address, the house Darius believed would soon belong to him. The crowd understood immediately. Darius froze. Constance tightened her grip on her clutch, and in that single moment, every story they had told about Imara collapsed. He did not fight the divorce. He did not fight for the house. He called his attorney and asked to close everything without contest. The only thing he requested was one meeting with Imara, not through lawyers, but face to face. On a quiet Saturday morning, he came to the house while the girls were there. He arrived with empty hands and no rehearsed speech. Sitting across from Imara at the kitchen table where they had shared thousands of meals, he admitted the truth. He said he had made choices he could not undo. He'd allowed his mother to humiliate Imara in front of their daughters, and he had stood there in silence. That silence, he said, had been a choice too. He did not ask for forgiveness. He only asked for the chance to be a father his daughters could still respect. Imara listened carefully. Then she spoke. The girls would stay with her, but he would have real access to them if he truly showed up and became the father they deserved. She told him she had always been strong enough to survive without him. What she had wanted was a partner. For the sake of Zola, Imara, and Ife, she hoped he would finally become one.